In today's show, recapping Media Day, where the Blazers had an air of reserve confidence, and the theme of the day was connectivity. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond, and you are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. We're back to 5 days a week, your only daily Trailblazers podcast. So why don't you start your day listening to Locked On Blazers? Make it your first listen every single day. It's Locked On Blazers, y'all, your team every day. Today's show, a fun one. I braved the trip to Moda Center. I made the trek from my home to the Blazers Arena where they held their media day, their introductory media session, inviting the local press to come meet with Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups and a smattering of players. And they spend the morning answering questions and getting you prepped for the season. Getting, I guess, me prepped for the season, and then I'm the conduit that brings it to you. Who knows who's getting prepped there? But I think while this wasn't newsy, I want to be upfront about that, totally. This wasn't a newsy media day. In fact, this wasn't like a juicy media day where it comes out and you're like, this is like 6 days worth of podcast, baby. We've had those in the past where there's been just stuff here and there to pull out. I'm not going to oversell it to you. This was a pretty cut and dry, hey, we want to be better. We hope we're better. Training camp starts. We'll see what happens. But it was different than in years past for a couple different reasons. One, in this setting in the past for the Blazers, both Damian Lillard and the previous GM Neil Olshey would sound the trumpets louder. Neil for sure would just, he would go over the top with confidence. It's how he liked to project outwardly. This is the deepest roster and most talented roster we've ever assembled. We can make a deep playoff run. We can make the Western Conference Finals. We think we can be a championship team and all that. And Damian Lillard would do the same thing. Like, this isn't just unique to Neil. This is like Dame has a determined confidence about him too, to be totally sure. And Dame would, say, hey, we're going to be this good. Hey, I think we can compete for a championship. No reason that we shouldn't be. All of those things, right? Like those would be very common refrains from this day in the past. That wasn't this. It wasn't that the Blazers lacked confidence. I think that would probably be a misnomer of kind of what it's been like, or what it was like, rather. There was a reserved confidence, though. When you asked, when asked about the sort of the team, Joe Cronin said, like, I think we're going to be good. But when Damian Lillard was asked about the team, it wasn't like he was not complimenting. He was excited about Anthony Simons, excited about Shaedon Sharpe, really excited about Jerami Grant, all of those things. But there wasn't the trumpeting. There wasn't the celebrations. This was a reserved, like, hey, we think we're going to be good, but we got to do it. And that's for obvious reasons. They were bad last year. They were bad last year first on accident and then on purpose, but they weren't competitive pretty much at any point during the season. I think they were 10-8, 18 games in. So pretty much from that point forward, they lost their next 3, slipped below 500 and never got back. Like, they were just not good. And they were not good pretty early on in the game. They were not very good. So it follows that they wouldn't be back here and saying, like, last year was a fluke and we're ready to go, baby. But it's like, this was a departure from the type of brash confidence that has typically followed from these days. That doesn't mean Damian Lillard didn't still offer his brand of confidence, right? He said that he thinks this team and the moves that they've made get them closer to a championship than they've been in the past. He didn't say they're going to win a championship or anything close to that. But he said that the moves they made, he likes the moves they've made, and he feels that they got closer. In fact, I asked Damian Lillard, like, who stood out to you in the gym so far, because the Blazers have, according to Chauncey Billups, basically most folks came back in August, and everybody's been there all of September. So we're talking 6-7 weeks of the team playing together, 3-on-3 and 5-on-5. So they've seen each other, they've played with each other, they're getting to know each other in kind of the informal type of practice stuff. And I asked Dame, like, who stood out? And he says, I didn't want to single anybody out. And then he kept going and talking, and he kind of singled out Jerami Grant. I was like, well, he's just really good. So it wasn't like there was lack of confidence. It wasn't like there was lack of excitement. It was just more reserved. And it was reserved in like a sort of a way that you would believe. And I want to play you a clip here of Joe Cronin's response to a question from Sean Highkin of the Rose Garden Report, who asked kind of like, how close is this team to being where Cronin wants it to be? And I think Cronin's answer is telling in how measured it is. And it touches on a theme that we'll talk about later in the show. So here's Cronin's response.
I like our talent. I like our mentality. I like the potential that our young guys have. We have a handful of young guys that I'm really high on and think can help us sooner rather than later. But with that, we have a group that essentially hasn't played with Damian. I mean, besides Nurkic and Anthony and Nassir a little bit, but they're completely different players now. These guys haven't played with Damian. So for us, it's going to be a lot of just getting to know this group and seeing what they're capable of. And early on, we're going to focus more on their connectivity and how together they are, more so than, whether we're winning games on a nightly basis. We're going to give these guys time to acclimate to Chauncey's system and to acclimate to each other. So, we know that in order to compete at the highest level in this league, you have to be ridiculously talented and super connected. And at this point, I don't think we're either, but I think we have the potential to be so. It'll probably involve making additions soon and definitely in the future, but I don't feel a huge sense of urgency to not give these guys a chance. Like, I want to see these guys play it out.
I think what you see there, or what you hear there rather, is Cronin kind of touching on everything that this media day was about. He's confident about this young group. He thinks they've got a combination of youth that he's excited about and vets that have been added and will get a first chance to play with Dame and take a step forward. But he also recognizes what the Blazers aren't. They aren't ridiculously talented and ridiculously connected. They can get there. And he wants to see them get there before he makes moves. The moves are coming. Like, the subtext of that response is like, yeah, we need to get better, and we know we need to get better, and nothing has changed in that world. But I think in general, the Cronin's response there sums it up. This team is confident about the direction they're going, but they're not crowing in the way they would have crowed in the past. There is a reserved or a measured approach to that confidence. Not a lack of confidence by any means, but just it's not as brash and as bold as it has been in the past. The other thing that Cronin mentioned there, and he mentioned it twice, connected. That's the theme of the day. Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups mentioned that word as much as they possibly could in their 30 minutes or 15 each that they spoke to the media. I want to talk about that theme because I think that kind of sums up where this team wants to go, and it sums up what this preseason is really about for the Blazers. That's what we'll do in the second segment. But before we do that, I want to tell you about BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action, whatever that might be, but particularly this season, we got college football and we got the NFL all weekend long. You're going to get more lines, more props, more odds on all things football right there on betonline.net. If you don't want to bet on football, you can bet on football, soccer here and abroad. You can bet on NBA futures bets, NHL futures bets, golf, tennis, combat sports, whatever it is. Go take advantage today. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. The theme of the day for Blazers Media Day was connectivity. It was, in some ways, Media Day is a chance for the Blazers to brand themselves. In the past, unintentionally, with kind of like Neil O'Shea putting his foot in his mouth sometimes, or some other, this is just other little like meme type things. But this was more like, this felt like much more intentional in the way they branded it. I'm kind of like come at teams for being corny on this podcast, and that's not what I'm doing here. Sure, it was a little corny, but it was like not anything out of the ordinary. It was a word chosen for a specific reason. And I think it speaks to what the Blazers are doing. When they left Media Day at the Moda Center, guys go through, like if you're not familiar with Media Day, there's like a press conference element of it, right? Where players were Cronin and then Chauncey Billups, and then the players kind of cycle through and you get to talk to everybody for 10, 15 minutes and say, hey, what'd you work on this summer? Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Ask them the questions that whatever it is might be. They speak to the media. But behind that, there's a bunch of internal media stuff going on. The Blazers are doing their sort of promos that are going to run on social media. They're going to run on the videos inside the arena. So like there's a lot. And it's like a full sort of media circuit that the station to station that players have to go through. So it's a long day of work. And then after that long day of work, they hopped on a plane and went to Santa Barbara. Training camp for this year, for the first time in a long time for the Blazers, as far as I know, I have some friends who covered the team for a long time. Shout out to Mr. Quick. But like, it's been, more than a decade since the Blazers have done this sort of departure type of thing. They're heading to Santa Barbara. And they're going to practice. They're going to run their, 2-a-days, a week of practices in Santa Barbara. They'll come back on Saturday. They play again on Monday. Their preseason schedule begins on Monday night. Like, they'll be back here and they'll be ready to go, and they'll play their light preseason slate. But the reason they're going to Santa Barbara is, one, it's a nice place. I think Chauncey Billups wants to play some golf, drink some wine, and have really nice weather. But the other reason he said he was going to do it is because it removes some of the distractions. Not that like going home to your wife and kids is like this detrimental distraction, but that when you need to get together, when you need to bond, you need to like be connected. Having your second practice of the day, you have a morning practice and an afternoon practice, and then like everybody goes home to their peoples back at their house where they live in Portland, you kind of miss an evening to bond. It's hard to, make multiple mandatory team dinners or team events or all of those things. In Santa Barbara, in that controlled environment, they're going to spend a whole bunch of time together. And part of that goal is to achieve the thing that Cronin and Billups harped on so much, is that connectivity. That is, to me, Portland's goal, both like in sort of like the soft bonding of team camaraderie that they want to accomplish by having this Santa Barbara trip to get connected. But it's also the style that Chauncey Billups wants to play. It is Cronin multiple times mentioned about some of the acquisitions that he made this summer, adding Gary Payton and Jerami Grant and the retention of Drew Eubanks, holding on to Justice Winslow and Josh Hart and those things, like not making some moves they didn't make. It's because it's like Chauncey's type of guys who will play unselfish, guys who will play hard, and all of those things. And the vision for Billups is this vision of ball movement and player movements taking a step forward. Billups talked about like how he's already spoken with Jerami Grant and Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard about when Nurk has the ball, we got to cut more off the ball. Like we have to move more off the ball. He talked more about sharing the basketball, and as opposed to it being my turn, your turn with Dame and Ant, like finding a balance between not just you go, I go, and like truly sharing the ball. I think they're still going to run a bunch of pick and rolls, but Billups specifically mentioned when he thought the Blazers were playing their best, they were a little bit lower on isolations and more ball movement, more player movement, playing faster, all of those things. That's the connectivity on the court they want to achieve. And that's when Cronin mentioned in the audio I played you in the first segment about the super connected of the best teams, is that's what they're envisioning. It starts off the court in this bonding stuff in Santa Barbara, an idea that was Chauncey Billups' that he brought to the team and said, hey, let's do this. But it's the idea of it and why it was like the theme of the day, the sort of like the almost mimetic word of the day, was that it is both that off the court goal and their like preferred style on the court. They want to be together, connected on defense so they can play aggressive and swarm and cover for each other. That's Chauncey Billups' preferred style on defense. That they can share the rock and overwhelm people with, a group that is going to tend to play a little bit small without Jusuf Nurkic on the court. They want to be connected because they think that is the thing that will, if they can't be uber talented, which they aren't, like they're good, but they're not uber talented, like they don't have 2 top 20 players in the league. This is not a super team. This is a team with Damian Lillard and some interesting parts. If Anthony Simons takes a big step, we'll change the tune. But like for now, it's Damian Lillard and some interesting parts. That to overcome a little bit of lack of talent and get where they want to go as like a competitive playoff team, it's that connectivity. It's trusting each other on court, playing together on both ends of the court, and that will be able to overcome and trump some of what they lack in the talent department. The best teams in the league, Joe Cronin says, are ridiculously talented and super connected. The Blazers aren't either one yet. It's hard to get super talented. It's not that hard, or it's less hard, I should say, less challenging to get super connected. I asked Chauncey Billups, I said, last year, you were kind of bummed with the general size of this team. Aren't you still kind of aware of how this team is small? And Billups said, you can't have everything. I like the players we have, and certainly we're going to be small sometimes, but the hard part of team building is you can't have everything. They made some choices. They made some moves. They probably couldn't get as big as they wanted to get because they couldn't upgrade the size on the wings. OG Anunoby wasn't available. Or wasn't available for the asking price. So if you don't have the roster still that makes sense, the way you overcome that is playing together. And that's why connectivity was absolutely the theme of the day for a variety of reasons. It is the thing that will help them get to be the best version of themselves. All right, to close the show in the third segment, I got some odds and ends, some just sort of news you need to know about what happened at Media Day. Light news day, like I said, but I still got some news. I'm bringing it to y'all. So why don't you join me in the third segment, won't you? Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked on Blazers. All right, Media Day news you need to know. No more themes, no more buzzword of the day, no more word calendar. News you need to know. Chauncey Billups confirmed what we all already knew. Or if you listen to this podcast, you already knew because I've been saying it for months. That's why you listen to Locked on Blazers, make your first listen every day. 4 starting spots set in stone. Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons are going to start at guard. Jerami Grant's your starting power forward. Jusuf Nurkic is your starting center. There is one, count them one, numerical 1, starting spot open and up for grabs. It is your small forward spot. And Chauncey Billups, when asked, mentioned 3 names. Nassir Little, Josh Hart, and Justice Winslow. I believe, and I've said on this podcast a whole bunch of times, that it's Nas is going to be the choice because Josh Hart just fits a little better. You can get the most out of Josh Hart if you play him minutes with either Dame or Anthony Simons as opposed to minutes with both of them because he can be a ball handler, he can be a playmaker, he can play 2-3 and some small 4 depending on the matchups. You can maximize what Josh Hart does probably in a bench role easier on this particular team than you can in a starting role, like specific to the Blazers roster and like specific to Dame and Anthony Simons. So I think it's going to be Nas. I think Josh Hart certainly has a chance, and Billups said it'll basically be an open competition in camp to see who wins it. But the funniest outcome by far is that Justice Winslow wins it. It's the funniest outcome by far, is that they say Winslow doesn't have much shooting touch. He's kind of a weird fit with everybody on offense. If you're going to have a weird fit with everybody on offense, why don't we put him out there with our 2 best offensive players, Dame and Ant, and see what happens? I don't think it's going to be Justice, but it's absolutely the funniest outcome. Billups also mentioned in passing that it could be like a committee where some nights it's Nas, some nights it's Josh Hart, some nights it's Justice Winslow. Come on, dog. Come on, Chance. NBA players hate that. Guys want defined roles. You can maybe get away with it if you're a really good team and you're late Duncan era Spurs, or if you're just loaded like the current Clippers, who had just like 12 NBA players, and at some point you might have to do that to get your 12 NBA players in the court. Billups not going to do that. He's going to pick one, and I think he's going to pick Nassir Little, but we heard it from him. The 4 starting spots are set in stone. Debating, it was always silly to debate whether Anthony Simons was going to start. I think it made sense to debate whether it was a good idea. That's another question, but he was always going to start. They were always committed to him and having that role. So it was always a small forward spot up for grabs. We kind of know what that looks like. We've known for a while, but Billups confirmed as much. Speaking of that small forward spot, the name you did not hear in that conversation was Gary Payton. One, he's just small. You don't want to start that small. He can guard up. I think he can guard threes fine. He can guard a bunch of different spots. He's a very good defensive player, and he can guard outside of his height because of the way he plays and his arms and his long arms and his strength and all of those things. Strength and standing reach is probably more valuable than just how tall your head is, but there is a limitation when you're as big as Gary Payton. He's probably more of a backup guard in his role, although what he does when he's on the court, we will define it when he get there. However, Gary Payton had core surgery in July, and he is not going to really be in, sounds like he's not going to get on the court too much in training camp, in terms of 5-on-5 stuff. He's hoping to be cleared in time for the regular season. Typically, when a guy uses the language he did, hoping to be ready, it means he'll miss the first couple games. That's just my pessimism. But somewhere around game 1, end of October, you will see Gary Payton. But he's the only guy who's going to be truly limited at training camp. Cronin said everyone else was dealing with minor stuff and pretty much good to go. The other sort of little bit of news is that everyone was excited about Shaedon Sharpe. Everybody was excited about Shaedon Sharpe. Obviously they were asked. It wasn't this wasn't a situation. Sometimes this summer the Blazers representatives have brought up Sharpe unprompted. This time it's hey, we haven't seen Shaedon Sharpe. Can you tell us about him? And Damian Lillard. I don't know why I had Greg Brown on the brain. Damian Lillard shared a story of, he was he's just so impressive. And he shared a story when Shaedon Sharpe and Nassir Little were playing one-on-one. And Nas beat him, kind of got him back on his heels and beat him to the rim and went up to dunk. And Shaedon Sharpe backtracked, took one step, and met Nassir Little at the top of the square, as Damian Lillard described it. At the top of the backboard square. So 12 feet in the air, 11 and a half feet in the air, and blocked his shot, got a full piece of the ball banked in off the rim and went in, count it. And, Nassir Little's counting it. He's not going to say he got blocked. He's going to say his shot was deflected, but he still scored. But those are the moments that are exciting. Folks watching Shaedon Sharpe is that he just has this athleticism that is effortless and special. Cronin kind of dialed it back on the Sharpe hype in a way that the previous GM absolutely would not have. He just said Sharpe needs reps. He needs reps. I think Sharpe plays at some point early in the season, but just judging by what came out of media day, I think I've crossed him off of likely to play on night 1 as opposed to, and he's now in the category of likely to play on week 1. Obviously that can change in training camp, but that's where I am after media day. 2 other bits of news. Jerami Grant, and I asked specifically Cronin about contract extension for Jerami Grant and Nassir Little. Jerami Grant is eligible right now today for a 2-year extension, but if you wait 6 months after the trade, you can extend him for more than 2 years. And it sounds like Cronin won't really talk with Grant's representatives until they get deeper into the year when they can talk longer extensions. 2 years is, he said there was mutual interest in both sides in reaching a contract extension, but that they hadn't really talked because of the limited number of years you can offer him. If they're going to re-sign Grant, and if Grant's going to, not just hit the open market, I'm sure he's going to want financial security for some time, some years. Also, the Blazers want to see if Grant fits. There's no reason, unless it was part of the wink-wink deal for trading for Jerami Grant, which it seemed like it was at one point. And it certainly still might be. It'll just happen in February when he can sign a 3-year extension, not a 2-year extension. But there's some incentive for the Blazers to let Jerami Grant play 35, 40 games and see if he's really the guy they think he can be. They're excited about him. Dame's super excited about him. Obviously, they have a good relationship from Team USA and seemingly has maintained a friendship, a professional friendship beyond that. But the Blazers extending Jerami Grant will probably come, if it comes later in the season. It sounds like just asking Joe Cronin, listening to Joe Cronin's response today. On the Nassir Little front, he is extension eligible from is basically until the start of the season, until game 1 of the regular season. You can sign a rookie entering his 4th year to a contract extension. If you don't agree by that game 1, they just they'll still just be a restricted free agent. You can sign them in the summer, but there is sounding like, from what Cronin said, was that he reached out to Nassir Little's people night 1, June 30th, as soon as they possibly could, when the new league year started, and said, hey, we'd love to, we want you to be part of the plan in the future. And he said there was, Nassir Little's camp said, yeah, we want to be part of it too. But judging the way that Cronin responded, I do not think Nassir Little signs a contract extension. Basically, he said a year out, and Nas is coming off all these injuries. He wants to play and bet on himself and earn himself some money. He doesn't want to sign a 3-year, $28 million contract. He wants to sign a 4-year, $60 million contract. And the way he does that is that he wins the starting spot in camp and just kicks butt all year long and is great, and is like an NBA starting small forward and is a really valuable 2-way wing. Then he'll earn himself some money. So Cronin said that, kind of just reading the tea leaves on his response. He didn't say this specifically, but I'm a tea leaf guy. Reading the tea leaves on his response, it sounded like he was it sounded like Nas was much more likely to just not get an extension because the Blazers want to pay him this much, he wants to pay this much, and you have to meet in the middle, and you have to meet in the middle before you enter year 4. And Nassir Little's year 4 is going to be the most important, perhaps most lucrative year of his career. He certainly believes so. He spoke with a bunch of confidence today. Him and Josh Hart were just wonderful interviews. Excited to have those dudes as talkers this year. I think that is everything you need to know from Media Day. There might be some other things, and certainly as we hit into training camp, we'll touch on other stuff, but that's what you need to know now. Tune in tomorrow's show. We're going to do a player preview, continuing our player preview series on Jerami Grant's, season preview player capsules with Jerami Grant's. If you're new to the show, hi, welcome. Thanks for making it this deep into the podcast. I'm very thankful that you are taking time out of your day to listen to the show, but I have been doing, and I will continue to do so, a preview episode for every single player on the roster. We've already done 8 that are waiting in your feed. However you're listening to this one, they are waiting in your feed right before them. 8 players, full episodes talking about roles and expectations and best and worst case scenarios and all of those things. I think they're a really good way to get prepped for the season. So if you haven't listened to those, go back and listen, and then come back for tomorrow's show because we'll talk all things Jerami Grant. That one's going to be a bunch of fun. Later in the week, Orlando Sanchez from KGW here in Portland is going to join the program. The first-time guest on the pod. I'm excited to have Orlando on here, so make sure you come back for that one. 5 days a week, available wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. Make it your first listen every day. Tell your friends to do the same. And how about this? Make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd over Locked On Fantasy Basketball does it better than anyone else. If you're a fantasy basketball player and you're not listening to Josh Lloyd, you are doing it wrong. Win your league. Go listen to Josh on Locked On Fantasy Basketball wherever you get podcasts. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.